All right, so today we're diving into the world of William Wordsworth. This is a poet who didn't just write about nature. He found the very pulse of human experience inside of it. And believe me, in doing so, he changed English literature forever. So let's start with this really powerful question. You have to remember, at the time, poetry was all about these grand heroes, gods, and super formal language. And Wordsworth comes along and basically asks, hey, what if the really big truths aren't in some ancient myth? What if they're right here? In the quiet dignity of a farmer, or the song of a girl in a field, or even just a simple field of daffodils. So, here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the revolution he started in poetry itself. Then we'll dive into the sacred power of nature for him. After that, we'll see the beauty he found in ordinary life, look at his ambitious map of the mind, and finally, we'll talk about why his ideas still feel so incredibly relevant today. Okay, let's get into it. A revolution in verse. To really get what Wordsworth did, you first have to understand what he was up against. The whole world of poetry back then was, well, let's just say it was a world of really strict rules and very, very lofty subjects. And you can see that contrast so clearly right here. On one side, you've got 18th century poetry. Think formal, rational, all about gods and nobles. Kind of stuffy, right? Then Wordsworth comes in and just flips the whole thing on its head. He says, nope. We're going to write about nature, about common folks. We're going to use real, sincere language, and it's all going to be emotional and personal. And the first shot fired in this revolution? It was a book, Lyrical Ballads. He published it with his friend Samuel Taylor Coleridge back in 1798. And let me tell you, this wasn't just another collection of poems. It was basically a manifesto. This book is what officially kicked off the Romantic movement in England, a total game changer. And this really gets to the heart of it all. For Wordsworth, poetry wasn't supposed to be some clever puzzle you had to solve. It was raw. It was authentic. It was, in his own famous words, the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. But, and this is so important, it also had to be in the language really used by men. It had to feel real. Okay, so he's got this revolutionary new style. What's he going to write about? Well, for Wordsworth, the answer was almost always one thing. Nature. Let's dig into how nature became this incredibly sacred, powerful force in all of his work. You see, for Wordsworth, nature was never just a pretty background for a poem. No way. It was a living, breathing force. It was his teacher, a healer for the soul, and even a kind of spiritual presence that connected him to everyone else. And especially with all the noise of the Industrial Revolution starting up, nature was his ultimate escape. A great example of this is his poem, Tintern Abbey. So he goes back to this beautiful spot he visited years before, and he has this big realization. Just the memory of that place had been helping him get through his busy city life for years. It gave him what he called tranquil restoration. It's this amazing idea that the experience doesn't just end when you walk away. It stays with you. And he puts this so beautifully in I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. You know the one about the daffodils. He says when he's just lying on his couch, feeling kind of blah, the memory of those flowers doesn't just pop into his head. He says they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. It's not a passive memory, it's an active, powerful vision that literally brings him joy. But Wordsworth wasn't just about pretty flowers. He was also a fierce critic of what he saw happening around him. In his sonnet, The World is Too Much With Us, he basically calls out society. He says that our obsession with getting and spending, materialism, is literally costing us our connection to nature. And by losing that, we're losing a piece of our souls. Right. So if nature was his church, then you could say that ordinary people were its saints. This is another huge part of his revolution, finding incredible beauty and dignity not in kings or queens, but in the everyday lives of regular rural folks. Take his poem, The Solitary Reaper. He's walking in the Scottish Highlands and he sees this young woman working alone in a field, singing. He has no idea what she's saying. It's a different language. But it doesn't matter. The pure, beautiful, melancholy sound of her voice just stops him cold. It's this perfect moment showing that true emotion doesn't need translation. And then there's Michael. Man, this one's a heartbreaker. It's about this elderly shepherd, Michael, a really hardworking, dignified guy. To save his family's farm, he has to send his son, Luke, off to the city. But Luke gets caught up in the temptations there, and, well, everything falls apart. The bond is broken, the farm is lost. It's a quiet story, but the tragedy feels absolutely epic. proving his point that the biggest dramas can happen in the simplest of lives. So this deep dive into personal experience on memory, on emotion, it was all building to something. It led to Wordsworth's most ambitious, most massive project ever. Basically, an autobiography of his own mind, written in verse. And that masterpiece is called The Prelude. He poured decades of his life into this thing. It was so personal, so monumental, that it wasn't even published until after he died. And get this, the scale is just staggering. 14 books. 14! This isn't just a scrapbook of memories. It's a full-blown epic charting the growth of his own spirit and intellect, from being a kid all the way to adulthood. And inside the Prelude, he covers, well, everything. He talks about his childhood in the beautiful Lake District and how nature literally shaped who he became. He digs into the power of memory. He even gets into his politics, how he was first a huge supporter of the French Revolution, and then how heartbroken he was when it all turned so violent. It really is a map of his mind. So why are we still talking about a poet who died in 1850? Why do his ideas still resonate? Well, it's because the things he cared about, our connection to nature, our inner lives, and the search for what's real, are arguably more important now than they've ever been. I mean, look at his legacy. His passion for preserving the natural world, that makes him a pioneer of environmentalism. His ideas about finding peace in your own memories and thoughts, that's basically the blueprint for mindfulness. And his whole thing about celebrating your individual, authentic experience, that's at the core of how we think about ourselves and our art today. And this famous, kind of tricky line, "The child is father of the man," it just nails his whole philosophy. What he means is that who we are as adults is completely shaped by our childhood. The person you are today was born from the kid you used to be. And for him, those early experiences, especially in nature, are the foundation for everything that comes later. Which brings us to one last question for you to think about. Back in his day, Wordsworth was worried that all the getting and spending was making people deaf to the world around them. So what about us? In our world of constant digital distraction and endless noise, have we finally forgotten how to listen?